Hey, this is Darren. We're back here with Dialogue 340, and we are here at the historical Fort Frederick. And I would just love to be in the presence of these historical ladies. And, we just want to have a conversation that's going to intersect education, food, and all the things cultural in between as well. So I want to start off with Sommer over there. I want you guys to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on, and then we're going to start into the conversation.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me on Dialogue 340. My name is Sommer Sibilly-Brown. I am the founder and executive director of Virgin Islands Good Food Coalition. I am Emmanuella's best friend and Chalana's sister-in-law. So I think
that connection is the connection is
also important context. But I am a Virgin Islander, born in St. Thomas, raised on St. Croix, and just really happy to be part of the conversation.
Good day, everyone. My name is Emmanuella Perez-Cassius. I am a Virgin Islander, proud Virgin Islander. I am a youth developer and an active voice inside of our community. And I made it, y'all. I am here on Dialogue 340, and I have been waiting to be a part of this because this is where good conversation will happen. And I love that. I love it too.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Stephanie Chalana Brown, and I am on my journey and becoming a historian, and also being able to shed a different lens on what the Virgin Islands and the Caribbean is through photography and cinematic lenses. And I'm always happy to be in conversation with my good people here at Dialogue 340.
Wait, you say you become a historian. You're already there. That's why I let you know. But
I'm working.
Continue to do it and pave the path for others. And I just want to say, it seems like a little reunion of our politics days. So shout out to Frank.
Frank, love you.
For the record, I sat many back doors, back sides in Polytalks. Okay, y'all were hot. That was a
Why
really
weren't you
good...
actively engaged in politics?
I wasn't ready.
Okay.
You have to be appointed.
Oh.
But I'm ready now, and I'm here.
That's what I'm talking about, right? So I want to start off in the first question because I think this paved the way to where we are arriving our destiny in our current time. Tell us a little bit about your experiences growing up in the Virgin Islands, like things that made you who you are, your experience. Just not you could give us the highlights, but I want the people to know more about your backstory.
First of all, growing up in the Virgin Islands, I would not change any of it. This place is so magical, and I feel so blessed to be a Virgin Islander and to be raised here in the Virgin Islands. And the things that I think made this journey so special was my grandparents, my grandmother, my father's mother, my mother's mother, having access to be raised in a family unit with cousins and uncles and aunties and everybody all around. That sense of family and community is really, really important to me. And then also being raised in between two islands, right? St. Thomas and St. Croix has shaped me. And I have to say, truly, Emmanuella's family has helped shape me. What I was talking about prior is my early years, from birth to 16. That's all, the Sibleys and the Glassfords and the Daniels, right? That's my blood. And then 16 and below, right? Then I count in the Perez's, the Browns, right? The other families that took me in and became moms, aunties. I miss Ramde Rodriguez, my Titi Oni, Dinora for Sings, the many families that when you live in this small community, you'll become a aunt, a cousin, a niece too, even though I am in blood. Those are the things that I think shaped me.
I love that. That's such a beautiful answer. Emmanuel, I want to get your take on that.
So mine is a little different. I have generational ties here on my father's side, but my mom is a part of that southern migration straight up to New York, right? So I grew up in a mindset of, I live here in the Virgin Islands, and my mother come here following my dad for love, stayed here and jumped into the community. So she definitely was we are activists, but she got that from her time in New York, right? Like under those Black Panther movements and stuff. So running on union lines, speaking up loud in places and advocating, I raised this side of that. And then I have my VI side that everybody have to own a piece of the rock. You know, I didn't grow up in those Virgin Islands households that was necessarily like tart and carnival. It was more like, own a piece of the rock, make sure you have your paperwork together, make sure your children them could get, and don't sell it to nobody. This is it. We fight hard to get it. This is ours. So I kind of grew up in like a radical sense of what life is supposed to be and what our responsibility is to own it.
And you know what's also full circle? Some of those, when you talk about your experience, the experience in New York and stuff, some of that was spurred by Virgin Islanders.
Absolutely. That's how my mom and my dad, like right there in Harlem. There was so many Virgin Islanders there, and she's going to NYU, but she was totally fascinated by the Caribbean culture. And they ignited her, and then Wang Papa ignited in a different way.
Yeah, I love that. A real Virgin Islanders story right there.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I also pass on the same question to you. What your experiences, how did that, you growing up, and how did that shape your current experience?
Yeah, I think it's by no chance that we are connected. And so I think we met each other, like, you know, as younger persons. I had connected with Emmanuella through our fathers. And those are tongue people, Hillsiders from Freegut.
Hillsiders.
And then I found a photo later on in life where my grandfather served in World War II with Sommer's great uncle. And so we've been connected in ways before we even like been in proximity to one another. Yeah. So that's not by chance, right?
No, that's the Virgin Islands way, those connections.
And then I think because I grew up in town and I grew up in like a lot of fragmentation, where I'm literally from Freegut and walking down the paths all the time and seeing the erosion of buildings, but hearing my grandmother talk about this great past we were from, but nobody was connecting me. I like to give reverence because it's Virgin Islands History Month, and I feel a connectedness to my grandfather, Louis E. Brown, but I've never had the opportunity to meet him in life, and people say I'm the eldest am quite similar to him. And he is from Frederiksted Town, big up to Clear Roca. I saw him connected to Frederiksted. But I think that's why I started to research more, because I think people effectuate culture a lot, but they don't necessarily know like the actual history and data and information about it. And I wanted to like fill in the fragmentation.
Okay, so we kind of dive into it. So let me start with Sommer, right? So you talk about your intersection of growing up on two islands, right? I also want to go back and explore one, that part of you, whereas your beginnings of, you know, being a child of an immigrant, growing up partly in St. Thomas. Can you tell us more about that?
You know, so I didn't know I was a child of an immigrant until I became an adult. So it's really interesting because the differences in my life about people who were from like different islands versus like ancestral Virgin Islanders, that wasn't such a big discussion in my household. The things that I was clear of when I was young is that use a Frenchie, right? I didn't have like a lot of like race conversations or other island conversations. I had a lot in my father's family. We had a strong French heritage and we had a strong Catholic background, right? And then in my mother's family, it was just like children and uncles and aunts, but we didn't talk about those things. And so I think when I realized that, oh, my mom is from, she was born at St. Kitts, my grandmother is from Antigua, and my mom is a naturalized citizen, I was a full-blown adult when I was just like, I was like maybe in my 20s, and it still didn't have that much weight or bearing to me because nobody made it a problem, right? Now I realize that there's like tensions or things that people may have thought about my father, whose family had been here for 100 years, being with somebody from the Eastern Caribbean who just come here, but that wasn't a reality in the world that Sommer grew up in.
So before we go any further, because somebody might be asking and watching this, what is a Frenchie? Can you describe that for us?
What is a Frenchie? A Frenchie is a person who has French heritage. So my great-grandfather, John Joseph Sibley, he came here from the island of St. Bart's. Frenchies, like you settle in either Frenchtown or in Northside. My family settled in Northside, and so is that history of French heritage, and we've been coined Frenchies on the island of St. Thomas. I don't know that there's necessarily Frenchies on St. Croix besides me, but yeah.
And just to ask, going on a little further, right? Being that you're a quote-unquote Black Frenchie, did that change your experience and how you experience things? Just tell us about it.
Absolutely. Because I don't think when I go to St. Thomas, or I don't think when I go anywhere that anybody associates me with having French heritage. I think they'll be like, oh, and then they hear my last name and they'll be like, use that Sibley. Because Frenchies, for the most part, as we understand them, they look white passing, right?
Yeah.
There's people with straight hair and, they're blondes and they have light eyes. And like my dad, even, they used to call him Oakham when he was younger. He had like reddish hair, but he could probably pass for more Cuban than he can like French. So I do think that's another thing I didn't know. There was a color barrier between me and some of my, like how I interpreted myself. But my family was also the rainbow, because I have cousins who are way darker than me that are also Frenchies. And then I have cousins who are way lighter than me who are also Frenchies. So like, I think my family kind of like span a rainbow. But was I aware? It wasn't my skin that had made me aware that something was different. It was my hair. That was like, when I was small, I had a huge like lioness mane, and it was different to everybody else here. And so it wasn't my skin that was the issue. I was like, well, how come I don't have bare hair? Right? Like,
oh, wow.
That was the differentiating factor, and my body weight. I think my family is a little bit more petite than I am, and I wasn't this full. I'm gonna call myself full, fluffy, right? But I was always like bigger boned in than my cousins. And so when people ask me what's my first interaction with like racism, I have to look back, and it's more around body weight and hair texture than it is around skin color. Right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny when I hear someone, first of all, Frenchies, for me, regular Frenchies are Europeans with Virgin Island accents, right? Like that's how when I was younger, that's how I thought that's what French is. I didn't understand the names and stuff because we didn't grow up in St. Thomas. But I was introduced to St. Thomas very young, and I was like, wow, these people have European features, right? Like straight off the top, I'm seeing them like white people, but then when they open their mouth, they sound roared on me. And I was like, what is this? But for me, my experience was Yankee. Yeah, your Frenchie was my Yankee. So because my mom is from the States, and my mom used to be so offended by that because she's from the South.
Wait, just before you continue, just because we have a worldwide audience, can you briefly describe what a Yankee is?
So a Yankee in the Virgin Islands is anybody that comes from the mainland. It don't matter what side of the mainland you come from, whether it's the South, the North. If you are from North American mainland, you are considered a Yankee here in the Virgin Islands. But for people who don't understand that, when you come here, like my mom, she was like, what is this? Why are you calling me a Yankee? Because the people from the South exactly affiliated Yankee with the Confederates, right? So she was like, we fought in the war. What do we mean? But I understood from young, because so many of my Crucian friends, when I go by their house and stuff, they used to be like, oh, Emmanuella, I don't know about Pochti because her mother is a Yankee. Or no, we did not grow up with Lipton tea, sir. Don't make your face straight.
No, I only say.
Everybody knows Bush tea. No, everybody did not know Bush.
No, I got you.
But I get the understanding, like Sibley was talking about, where people just see you from the outside and just automatically assume. So for me, I had a lot of, you speak so well, it's because her mother is a Yankee. Oh, she don't talk, it's because her mother is a Yankee. And then also I spent so many summers and stuff in the States that I didn't even understand people who never left the island, or never been to a museum. What do you mean you've never been to Radio City Music Hall? Everybody goes there for Christmas. I didn't experience my first Crucian Christmas until I was 14, and I never went back after that. Well, I realized that St. Corridor shut down and people are party all December. I was like, why they keep taking me to New York every Christmas when I could be down here walking up and tearing up the streets? And I love it. Mass is still one of my favorite things to do here. But that idea of different, I knew from very young. From very young, I knew that it was different because my mom was from the States, that the understanding of who I was a minimal Virgin Islander. You know, I didn't have the full Chalana Virgin Islands.
No, because my dad is born in New York. My grandmother was part of that, export to New York.
Was from New York.
I gonna drop it here to talk it. Use salt is one of my grandmother's sister's children.
Oh.
Yes, because all of them went to New York together. So my father actually is going to call a Yankee, and he used to be sent home every Christmas. And then he came back to live here. So I have
Look at that. I didn't even know that.
is from the Bronx. But I also wanted to say that sometimes people make the nuances that Black equals Virgin Islander, but Virgin Islanders come from every race. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but some of the same people who enslaved us, their families are still here, and they count as Virgin Islanders too. They might have different sides of the stories of history as good as, but Virgin Islanders come in many different races and cultures. Yeah.
And we need to make sure that is well known. So I love that you make that point. So I want to transition over because we talk about the genesis. Now we're coming into full-fledged adulthood, right? And I know each one of you guys has spent time in education, right?
Yes.
I want to start with Sommer because I know this is the point where you basically pivoted at some point. But before we get to that point, tell us about what your time in education, how did that shape you? And, what was the challenges that you saw? And we won't get into more deeper after that, but let me start off with that.
So I would not be who I am today had I not spent time at Ricardo Richards Elementary School. And I can't, that ultimately shaped who people engage with today, right? Not just the school system, but the children and their families. Intermediate multi-age classroom, IMAC, that is my chair, and that is me when I was just returning home from living in the States. 2, that's the first time as an adult I kind of feel the weight and responsibility of care. I used to walk to the Boys and Girls Club during the summers. My first real job at 19 was at the club. I think I felt a sense of community and connectedness to those young people as well. But when I step into Ricardo Richards in my late 20s, early 30s, I was ready and I was surrounded by excellent educators who loved what they did and the level of dedication that they had to those children. When you come to Ricardo Richards, right, when I started, I don't know if it's still this way, but there is no such thing as 7 to 3, right? And so you think you start in a job where you have to be there at 7:15 and you leave in at 2:45, and if that school is for you, I feel like kind of like PBL, you don't fall into the culture, and all of a sudden you're part of this network of people who just really want to provide something that is shaping and caring for the next generation, and they become your family. So Ricardo Richards built my ethics, the ethic that I show up for in VI Good Food and Community. Seeded by my family, but Ricardo Richards was the first place I got to demonstrate it. It also seeded how I show up authentically. Every year on my evaluation, Miss Williams used to be like, Miss Sibley self-evaluate. And I used to say the 2 things we know Miss Williams is that she don't wear closed-toe shoes. She gonna be. And 7:15 is not real. But what was real was that 6:30 was whatever she needed me to do from the time I get her. And so I never had a fully excellent evaluation, but I strived. And Miss Williams used to laugh after me because every year was the same thing. So also like those kind of like little rebellious boundaries of I'll give you my best and this is also me was shaped in Ricardo. And VI Good Food wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the children of IMAC, if it wasn't for before working with Wanda Viale and Miss Griffith, who at one time her husband was my principal, and then she became my co-worker. Oh gosh, Paulina Krosky, Minerva Delani, those women. Oh man, those women, like Sommer Sibilly-Brown, as the community experiences her, my time in education, that shaped me.
Okay, and then I want you also guys are spending time in education. How does that shape you as well?
Oh, for sure, education shaped two things for me. One, the confidence I have in educating, right? I learned through education that I have a gift of gab in a way that can be used to help empower. Children were the first people who had confidence in the things that I said. But what I really, really loved and learned from education that I have to say is that everything is interconnected in government. And I understood the larger system of government because I was in the classroom. But I also understood the larger system of family. And that's really the two core things that drive me today. And I've never looked back on anything. I gamble on the youth in everything that I do, whether it's in nonprofit, whether it's in political work. It's always about the children for me. And I balance it by staying engaged with the families who let me know the wider Virgin Islands. Raised in East End, in Thai Village, going to Pyramid and Elena, you learn a part of the Virgin Islands. But you know what I really learned? Charles Howard, not the Charles H. Emmanuel. The first time I walked in, I was like, and this was the first time meeting the populations from Montreal, meeting the populations from there. So it grew. And then when I went to Frederickstead and I meet Frederickstead, I was like, oh, our family is different. Like St. Croix is not just one kind of people, one kind of understanding, one kind of engagement. Education brought that to me, brought bigger families and a wider view of who I am as a Virgin Islander instead of just trying to box myself into what I grew up with as a Virgin Islander.
Yeah. For me, I do work in the department right now. I get to steward this lobby division started by Dr. Larson and Governor Turnbull. So that's a beautiful legacy. But also for me, my mother, like I know your mother working in Department of Education. I've always feel like education and a community were not separate from one another. And just like Sommer says, she has evaluation. Sometimes my evaluation goes that like I learn too heavily outside externally. But I felt like the becoming of me and learning about my culture and history wasn't necessarily from the department itself. I gained it from outside partners, from civic groups, from agencies like UCA, and all of these things that reinforce what I did learn in school. And so I'm always in a parallel of trying to recognize that there's experiential learning outside of our classrooms, and then we reinforce it within the school system. So that's how I've experienced education on both platforms.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I love all of that. So let me go to Sommer back because this is where at some point you hit the crossroads, right? What did I look for you and what gave you the courage? Because you went from the public sector, right? You got stability, you know how it goes. Everybody tell you to get the government job. What gave you the courage to pivot out of that and now cross over to good food?
This is the good stuff.
You know, the moment I found myself, so there's this series of things that happen where people might not know contextually there's an 8% cut. So the things that happen at Ag Fair, from the school perspective, the teachers who put up the booths, they're like me doing it. You know, so we did these side conversations and the teachers is like, not this year, they cut my pay, me doing nothing extra. And as a para, but I was under the margin for 8% cut, not even knowing, right? My salary wasn't there yet. I did a conversation and like in solidarity, I like me doing nothing neither. But the Ag Fair boot has to go up. And Miss Williams calls me into the classroom and she says, hey, Sommer, you're going to be in charge of the Ag Fair boot this year. And I watch and she, man, was like, that is not happening. Not at all. But meantime, she needs one enough to say to her face, but then in my head, nope, 8% cut. So anyway, that's like in October. February rolls around and I'm like, yeah, let me go tell Miss Williams, do this thing. And I go into her office and I was like, hey, Miss Williams, I need to tell you that we ain't gonna have the fair this year because time get away from me. I had a whole story and I executed it with perfection. Colleen May Williams ain't even look up from the desk. Colleen said, Miss Sibley, I believe in you. Huh? What? Listen, I ran back to that classroom like a crazy woman. And I was like, Sharon, call your mother. Somebody have to stay. Miss Williams believing in me to execute something on behalf of Ricardo was like, what? And the kids' parents, they chose to believe in me and they leave the children them stay after school. 8 children stayed. We did a beautiful presentation around farm to school. Big up Denver Straker, Zenaya, Joshua, Nanika, like all who are grown adults now, Oshan, and those kids stayed and the whole class got involved. Miss Krasky let me take over the class. We had research happening, beam. All I wanted to do was place. That's all I wanted to do. I was like, what's the statement? Miss Sibley don't like embarrassment. Great. We went, we placed. What? Miss Sibley, listen, Ayo. We had a week. We come back, third prize, pizza party, Coke, ice cream. Everything was great. And the children came to me and said, Miss Sibley, the judges told us that if we really could make this program happen, we'd be doing something good for the Virgin Islands. And that moment shifted something in me because I was like, I could be another hypocritical adult who tells children all the right things. Or I could invest in showing this body of students that something could be different. We will either do it together and fail or do it together and win. So we do it. And we had a year-long project. Miss Williams sanctioned it. And things are going great. We're working with School Lunch, Angela Fret, Nilda Bori, Leah Christian, things moving. And I found myself in this place where I was just like doing this work more than I was being present with the children. And something I feel after me, like these children deserve somebody who wants to be in the classroom. I found myself sending emails about farm to school and not supporting the classroom teacher. So I had a difficult decision to make. So I started indoctrinating my parents slowly, right? So like about 6 months prior to me departing, I was just like, so, I think I may have to do something different, but it's only me and I don't have children. So, I'm an only child. And I still today live at home with my mother, which has always been, I've always wanted an extended family, right? So I was just like, yeah, Mom, so things might be different, but I promise I ain't gonna be a burden. And at the end of the school year, when you're going to renew, I was just like, Miss Williams, I really, it's time for me to make my exit because these children deserve more and they've given me a gift. I didn't say this to her then, but I know now that they had gifted me with my destiny. And so, I left and I was scared and I was like, I don't know what I gonna do next. But what happened is Emmanuella was also making her own transitions. Mm-hmm. And Emmanuella transition makes space for what I would end up doing next, right? So, yeah.
We said it would be scary, but we won't regret it, And it was a different time and transition. I remember the refinery was shutting down around that time. All of these things was happening in context. So my husband had to leave to go away, and I was like, yeah, it's time for me to leave education too. And everybody was like, you crazy. You can't leave Agwajim there 13 years. And I just got my degree. That took me 10 years to get it. So I was finally at the space now where I certified as a teacher by myself inside of the classroom. And here I was getting ready to step out into the mainland and see what this is like out there. And I'm so grateful I went because for the first time I saw youth development from outside the classroom. Up until now, I was great in the classroom and I got all the skills needed to be the best teacher to increase those scores. Right. But when I went to the States and worked for the Boys and Girls Club of Metro Atlanta, and they said, education for children is not about telling people what to do. It's about exposing them and creating opportunities for them to learn who they are. Mm-hmm. Because then they will go off into the world. That was it. I was like, oh, Sibley, I found it. Yes. This isn't about me strengthening reading and math skills. This is about me strengthening individuals so that they believe in whatever it is they love to do and they have the confidence to go and get. How do they get there? You expose them to everything. Everything. Come back to the Virgin Islands with one plan, Darren. Mm-hmm. Expose our children to everything and teach them how to use their voice respectfully, of course, because they don't want nobody getting beat, in the Virgin Islands, ain't like the States. In the States, you teach them to use the voice and they could push back without getting a cough. In the Virgin Islands, don't push back too far because you might get your head spin. So I had to teach them what I know as a Virgin Islander, but still advocate, use your voice, use your words, not your hands. And these are the things I've taught since I've come back. But those things that happened in St. Croix at that time was like, that's what made it happen.
Emmanuella moved to Canada, and then from Canada, she moved to Atlanta. When she left a space open at St. Croix Landmark Society. So when I say her leaving, like connected to create an opportunity for me. So then Sonia Dow, who needed someone to run her camp, that Emmanuella used to run, she picks up the phone and she calls. So I quit my job, and in less than 3 weeks, I have an offer to be a summer camp director because Emmanuella leaving makes space for me to slide into. And then from that summer camp director, I become the education coordinator for Landmark Society, in which Beverly Nicholson Doty walks in. And I become one of the people who's building a living museum under funding she gives Miss Dow. So she begins to experience me. And one day I get a phone call from Sharon Rosario and Carlota Louis saying, Sommer, when you coming in for the money to do the program? And I'm like, what program? She said, Commissioner say you're going to be building a program for you during Dine VI. I was like, okay, sure, let's go to the office. So I drive to Frederickstead, like I build in a program. I'm also talking to Deanna James and I'm talking to Roger Dewey, right? And so like good food is a thing, but not really. And then we have our first food learn, because if I wasn't at Landmarks, I would have never met Commissioner Doty, and I would never have gotten the funding to kick off Food Learn, which is one of the first places we become visible.
So, just before you jump in the next part, I know you also had to take a leap of faith, right? What was that for you? Like, did you get that pushback? Did somebody tell you, hey, you're a little crazy? Or did somebody tell you, like, you could do it? Like Sommer was talking about earlier, somebody told her you could do it. What was that like for you?
Just be honest, I'm a little bit younger than them, and so they've always been in my life. So literally, they paved the way, and I just sort of followed. So I was there in those conversations, and we're all effectuated into the belief systems of what you should do. So the biggest thing for me is when she was leaving her job and she was asking everybody in her circle about, should I leave? And I was like, oh my God, you're not going to have any health care. Oh my God. She was like, hey, you sure? And, it was just really hard for me to tell her. And I was like, I can't say that I was the biggest proponent of her leaving, because I always think about what I have been taught about stability. So right. I was able to live a life through some of their experiences. And so,
Pave in the path.
I sighed, and I wasn't so scared to pave mine as well.
And I love that, because I think we need more of that. So before we wrap up, I want to go back to you, Sommer. Why agriculture?
I feel like it picked me. I feel like it's kind of like Chalana made this reference earlier. I personally believe that destinies are waiting for us to arrive at them. Mm-hmm. And the things like me and Emmanuella becoming friends and meeting at 8, but our houses being right next door to each other at 18. Mm-hmm. What is destiny? Chalana, Louis Brown, knowing Leo Sibley and serving, right? Destiny. So I feel like my great-grandfather, John Joseph Sibley, what people know him as is, right, they know him to be altruistic, but he was in agriculture. He built the agriculture station in St. Thomas, that there's an office. He did that. He engineered the roads. He was in agriculture. My mother's father, who is from St. Kitts, he was a minister of agriculture, and he was a public speaker. And I feel like those energies were just laying dormant inside of me, inside my DNA, waiting for me to remember, waiting for my legacy to awaken. And that moment, those children in IMAC, that moment in Ricardo Richards, when Colleen May Williams said, I believe in you, and those children trusted me to make something happen, I just believe it activate my DNA. And so I didn't know that I could be good at agriculture or I could be a great advocate. I wasn't Emmanuella who grew up with that radical, like I grew up with community and family and service, but to each other. Emmanuella grew up with community and family of service to community, right? So I didn't have that same thing, but that moment it was like somebody press a button and it's like DNA activated. And all of a sudden, right? The downloads and the passion, and I was just like, oh, I'm good at this. This makes sense to me. With no formal training, just a whole bunch of YouTube and Google University before it was actually a thing. And all of this, my brain knew what to do with it. So like that's why agriculture is, because I believe it was laying dormant inside of me. And I believe that not just for me, but I believe we all have ancestral legacy, memory, and story inside of us, waiting for us to say yes to something that'll just power us all up.
Activate us, yeah.
All right. Well, as you guys can see, we have so much more to get to, so stay tuned. We're going to talk more with the ladies. And just know that Dialogue 340, we'll be right back.